Okay.
Hello classes, today is William's first birthday. Yay! So to celebrate, we have dressed up like our favorite movie, Frozen. So William here is Fed, and we have Olaf, and I'm dressed up today as Elsa. Alright, so we hope you guys are having a fun weekend, and just one more week before spring break, so look forward to that. Say bye!
Bye.
Bye! Hello class, today we're going to be doing measures of center. Today's William's first birthday, so we're dressed up today as the characters of Frozen. I am Elsa. Perhaps Olaf will be making an appearance later. So let's get started with some definitions, okay? We're going to be doing sections 7 and 8 today. You have a long weekend because I want to get this chapter done before spring break so you can go on spring break worry-free, and we'll have our unit test on Friday of next week. That way when we return from spring break, we can start fresh, okay, with a new chapter. All right, let's look here at the mean. The mean is the average of numbers. So we're talking about a set of data now, and we can measure this set of data in a few different ways, called the measures of center, which are the mean, median, mode, and range. Okay, so mean is another word for the average. And to find the average, you have to sum up all your numbers, so the sum of all the data, and divided by the number of numbers. So for example, if I were going to find the average of the numbers 1 through 10, then I would add up all those numbers, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and so on, all the way up through 10, and then divide it by 10 because I have 10 numbers, okay? And then that would produce your average. So the average between 1 and 10 would be 5, okay? The median is the middle number. So if I had them listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 5 again would be the median because it's that number right in the middle. There's a key thing here is that you must have, the numbers must be in order to find the middle number. So the numbers must be in order to find your median, okay? The mode is the most often occurring number. They don't necessarily have to be in order, but my hint to you when you're doing the homework is to just go ahead and list them in order from the beginning, and it also makes it more easy to identify that most often occurring number, okay? And I remember these as mean is the average, median sort of sounds like middle, so I remember that, and mode, M-O, most occurring value, okay? So that's one trick to help you remember which one's which. And the range is just the difference between the largest value and the smallest value. Difference in math means to subtract. So you just take the big number minus the smallest number, and that's going to give you your range. So for example, in our example of 1 through 10, you would subtract 10 minus 1, so you have a range there of 9, okay? And an outlier is just any value that is much smaller or greater than the others. So if I had that list of 1 through 10, and then I had 400. 400 is an outlier. It is so far off from the rest of the data that we wouldn't even consider it. So this would be called an outlier, okay? Let's talk about when it's best to use this data. So it's best to use the mean when there are no outliers, meaning that you don't have that large value like we just talked about, 400, that's going to skew your data to be much larger than it should be, when the rest of your numbers are all below 10. So if there's no outliers, mean is your best option. Median would be best if there are outliers, meaning that there are those large numbers that are going to skew your data one direction. So we talked about 1 through 10, even if you have 400, then that would curve all of your data towards that larger 100. But the reality is most of the numbers are less than 10. So the median just accounts for what number is in the middle. And so it wouldn't take into account that large value of 400, okay? And also this is best when the middle has no large gaps. So we're not going 1, 2, 3, 4, say 21, 22, 23, where we have that huge gap in the middle, okay? So median, there are outliers and no large gaps. And the mode would be the best occurring if the data has lots of repeating values. So if you had 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, then 2 would be the most often occurring number, and that would be our best measure of center because it's happening the most often. Okay. Let's find the measures of center for these basketball scores for our favorite team. Okay. My hint to you is to always start by reordering the numbers from least to greatest. So our smallest number here would be a score of 9. Okay. You could check them off as you go. Then I don't have anything in the 10s, but now look at the 20s. I have 25, I see a 28, 29, okay? How about now in my 30s? I have 30, 2 32s, so 30, 32, 32. Let's see what's next. 34, 35, and 36. So I'll come down here, 34, 35, and 36, followed by 38 and 40. You always want to double check that when you make your list that you still have the same number. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So I've got the same number of numbers, so I'm feeling pretty good about this, okay? And now we can find the mean, and the mean we have to sum of all the numbers divided by the number of numbers, okay? We just said that there were 12 numbers, so I know my denominator is going to be 12. Now I can add them all up. You'll get a total of 368, which you can now divide by 12, and you'll come up with an approximate mean of 30.6 bar, okay? So the average score of points per game is going to be 30 6 points per game. So now let's look at the median. The median is the middle number, okay? So let's look here. I want you to think, if I have 12 total numbers, then the median is going to be in the middle, so the sixth number, right? So I like to do this, cross one off on each end until you get to the middle, okay? Now notice here that you have two numbers in the middle. What's nice about this, and I say two numbers in the middle because you have 5 that are less than and 5 that are greater than, so these two are tied for that middle position. If they're tied, then you have to take the average of them. Sometimes it'll just be one number in the middle, but this case we have two. Here these two happen to be the same number, but if they weren't, then you would take the average. You could add 32 plus 32, and you have two numbers, so then divide by 2, which will give you 64 divided by 2, which is 32. So these ended up being the same because they were the same number. But if they weren't the same number, this is how you would find the average of those two middle numbers to get the true median. So here our median is 32 points per game. And our mode is going to be the most often occurring value. So let's look here. Do we have anything that repeats? And yes, 32 repeats. Now the mode isn't just any number that repeats, it's the one that repeats the most. So if you have more than one number that repeats, then whichever one repeats the most is going to be the mode. If they repeat the same number of times, you can have more than one mode, okay? So mean, you can only have one value, median only has one value, but mode can have more than one value. Here, our most often occurring number is going to be 32. Based off what we talked about in that last screen, what would be the best measure of center here? So first ask yourself, well, the mean is the best if there are no outliers, but do we have any outliers here? I think so. I think that 9 here is an outlier because that is the least amount. They're scoring a minimum then of 25 to 40 points per game, and then one game they were just really off and scored a 9. So I don't think that mean would be the best here because there is an outlier. If I look at the middle of this data, is there any large gaps other than that outlier? No. So I think here that the median is going to be the best measure because there is an outlier and because there are no large gaps in this data. And the last thing is we forgot to find the range. And the range is simple. You just take the largest number, which is 40, and subtract the smallest number, which was 9. And so the range is a total of 31 points is your range. And that's how you find the measures of center. In the second part of today's lesson, I'd like to talk about stem and leaf plots. Stem and leaf plots are a way that we can organize data to create a more visual representation that could be easier to read. So to create a stem and leaf plot, we're going to separate all these digits from the ones place from the tenths and hundredths place. So for example, I would like to create my stems. So notice here that your data starts, my lowest piece of data is going to be 50. So you want to find your smallest piece and your largest piece, which happen to be right next to each other. So the leaf is going to be your ones place in terms of the number, so 2 and a 0, and then your stem comes from your tenths place, or in this case, the hundredths place. So we'll start here with 5, and you cannot have any gaps. So if you're going to go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So you could not jump from 5 to 7. You have to have everything there, okay? And so these represent the tens place for all of these numbers. Now I'm going to add in my leaves. So how many 50s, any test scores that are in the 50s? Well, I have the one here, 52. So I would put 5 and a 2 to represent 52. How about in the 60s? Again, I just have one, 68. So I would put 68. Now the 70s, I have two now, 72 and 74. I want to put both of these here. So you put a 2 and a 4. This represents two different numbers, 72 and 74. So this is a way that allows you to break it down and see how much in these categories you have. So you can see I have more tests in the 70s than I did in the 60s or the 50s. Let's look at the 80s now. I have 80, so I put a 0. 81, add a 1. Let's see, 85 and 88. So a 5 and an 8. Each one of these values represents a different number, 80, 81, 85, 88. Let's look at the 90s. I have a 90, 93, and 96. So 90, 93, and 96. And the last one is going to be my hundreds. So I already have the 10, and I just need 1 0 here for the hundreds. So then, of course, like I said before, count to make sure you have the same number, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Here I also had 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So I have all the pieces of my data entered into my stem and leaf plot. Okay? Your stem and leaf plot should also contain a key. And the key is going to tell you how to read the stem and leaf plot. So you could just use your first one. So 5 as the stem and 2 as the leaf is going to equal 52. That key tells you how to read the stem and leaf plot. From here, we can now find some measures of center. So let's first find the median. Let's start with the mean. And the mean is the sum of all the numbers divided by the number of numbers. So it is equal to the sum over the number of numbers, which we just mentioned was 12. And now I can add up all of these values. So the mean here, add them all up. So this gives you a total here of 979, which then you can divide by 12 to get an average test score of 81 and 6/10, okay? 81.6. Now let's find the median. Notice that we have 12 numbers, so I'm looking for the 6th number in both directions, because 6 is half of 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's one. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here's the other. When you're going from the top down, you'll go downwards from left to right. But if we're working backwards, then we're going to go upwards from right to left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 number. If you have an even number of total values, then you're going to have 2 that are tied for the middle number. But if you have an odd number, then there's just going to be one median. But remember here, if you have 2, which is 81 and 85, then you add them up, 81 plus 85, and divide it by 2. 81 plus 85 is 166. Divided by 2 is going to be 83. So my median number is 83. Notice that I don't have that value of 83 in my data, but that's okay, because sometimes the median has to be the average of those two middle numbers, okay? And the mode is next. So the mode is the most often occurring number. So do I have any repeating values? No, I do not. So there can be no mode. In this case, there is no mode. And we can talk about the range, which is going to be your largest number of 100 minus the smallest number of 52, which is going to be a 48-point range, okay? 48-point range. I could then ask you to describe this data. So I could ask you, which range does most of the kids have their test scores? And so you could write a sentence saying that most students scored in the 80s. Or you could say most students scored above a 70, since only 2 were below a 70. Okay? Any type of a sentence here that you're looking at the data to write a comparison statement. Okay? And so that concludes today. Now there is one problem that I'd like for you to give a try, and it's going to be a back-to-back stem and leaf plot. So it's going to have some data on the right and some data on the left. So So I'm assigning that to you as a challenge problem on your homework. If you're really struggling with it, don't hesitate to email, call, or text. We're always here available for you. But I want to see if you guys are able to take what we learned here and apply it to the back-to-back stem and leaf plot to see if you can figure it out. All right, have a good day. Bye.